You set up the Paris Process on Mobility and Climate at the International Transport Forum last year. What is it seeking to achieve?
Thank you, Nick. The PPMC, as we call it in short, what we're trying to do is to bring stakeholders together from across different groups, government, private sector, the development community, and to get a concerted action going in terms of action on transport and climate. Last year, when we launched the PPMC here at ITF, the big ask that we had was an ambitious agreement on climate change, which would empower action by the transport sector. And obviously we were delighted to see the outcome of the agreement, which actually went further than many people had thought, including in the transport sector, by coming up with a target which says that we need to go well below the 2-degree scenario to a 1.5 degree target.
And you must welcome the initiative launched here this week to decarbonize transport.
Yes, it's very exciting. I've been coming to ITF now for 5 years, and I think I've never felt such a vibe, such a sense of anticipation that people, wherever you go to the lunches, you go to the sessions, you go to the cocktails, you go to the dinners, and everybody talks about the same thing, which says we need to transform transport. And the idea that we are taking on this assignment to decarbonize the transport sector, which really means that we are going to have an entirely different transport sector in 20 or 30 years from now. This is something which a couple of years we could have never imagined.
And COP21, the climate change conference in Paris, didn't actually mention any particular sector. It didn't mention transport. Does that worry you?
No, it doesn't. In fact, we felt that this was a positive development. In previous years, in the discussions and in the documents coming out of the annual COP meetings, we saw that there were frequent references to specific sectors like forestry and energy, while other sectors were not mentioned. If you read the agreement carefully, you will see that there was a very clear effort made by the drafters of the agreement to ensure that no sector was singled out in terms of action or singled out for not being included. So on the basis of that, we see the Paris Agreement as a very strong mandate for change in the transport sector.
And if you return here next year, what do you hope will have been achieved in the transport sector?
For 2016, we've got 4 priorities. The first priority is that we say we want to come up with a global narrative on transport, and we've talked up to now about climate change, but at the same time last year there was also an agreement on sustainable development goals, which talks about how do we develop the individual sectors in support of sustainable development. So through the course of this year we need to bring together the plans that we have on sustainable development with those on climate change. We also need to come up with a roadmap, and that we say, how are we going to decarbonize the transport sector? So this fits in very closely with the decarbonization project, where we are happy to be a partner with ITF. We also need to ensure that we are not only talking about medium and long-term action, so we also need to talk about what are the quick wins that we can do in order to put the sector on track for the future. I think then the next thing is we need to make certain that we have the buy-in of senior decision makers, both in government and in the private sector. Then the third step that we need to do in 2016 is we need to see how do all the pieces fit together. Last year we had the governments coming up with the nationally determined contributions. We have the implementation plans for the Sustainable Development Goals. We have another big conference coming up in October through the Habitat 3 conference, which will come up with action plans. So how do we fit those together? And then lastly, we need to look at how does the sector organize itself. We know that SLoCaT, the organization I represent, and the PPMC is one of the actors, but there are other actors as well. And we need to see what is the best institutional or governance arrangements which can really scale up all of the work that we are doing.